The wind howled low through the spruce trees that lined the Carter property, carrying with it the scent of snow and something older, something wild. In the heart of Alaska's backcountry, miles from the nearest paved road and a day's ride from the town of Talkeetna, the Carter family had carved out a quiet life in a world untouched by time. Their log cabin stood firm against the elements, its cedar plank walls darkened by wind and weather. Smoke curled steadily from the chimney, curling into a sky already turning violet with the coming dusk. Inside, the warm glow of lantern light flickered across worn wooden floors and hand-stitched quilts. It was the kind of place where silence wasn't empty, it was sacred. Samuel Carter stood on the front porch, a thick flannel wrapped over his broad shoulders, steam rising from the mug cradled in his calloused hands. At 47, Samuel was a man of few words and quiet endurance, with graying stubble along his jaw and eyes that seemed to carry the stillness of the forest itself. A former ranger turned off-grid homesteader, he understood the land's rhythm better than most men understood their own breath. Inside, his wife June labored quietly through the pains of childbirth. She was younger than Samuel by nearly 10 years, with strong, capable hands and fiery red hair tied back with a strip of muslin cloth. She had once been a teacher in Anchorage before the stillness called her north. Here, she learned the old ways, birthing without hospitals, healing with herbs, surviving with grace. Their first child was coming. June's cries were quiet but sharp, cutting through the cabin's calm like a pine branch snapping beneath snow. Samuel waited near the hearth, wringing his hands, while old Miss Emery, the midwife who'd helped deliver half the children in the valley, tended to June with a patience only age can provide. When the baby came, there was no grand noise, no wild scream. Just a stillness. The baby's skin was pale, her hair stark white, so soft it seemed made of light itself. Her eyes opened wide and blinking, the color of glacial ice. And when the cord was cut, Miss Emery paused. "Sam," she whispered, holding the baby up to the lantern. "You best come see this." The blood on the cloth wasn't red, it shimmered faintly silver beneath the flickering flame. Samuel looked on, breath catching in his throat. June reached for her daughter, eyes filled with awe, not fear. "She's not sick," June said, as if answering a question no one had dared ask. "She's just different." They named her Elsie, a name carried down through June's grandmother's line, one spoken in hushed tones in old stories about children marked by nature. That night, as a storm rolled through the mountains and snow began to fall in earnest, Samuel laid another log on the fire and sat close beside his wife. He looked down at the baby sleeping soundly in her arms, that faint silver glow still flickering beneath her skin. And from deep in the forest, far beyond the ridge, the wolves began to howl. The storm that followed Elsie's birth lasted 3 days. Snow piled thick along the cabin's eaves, sealing the windows in icy patterns. Outside, the world turned white and still, as if holding its breath for the strange child now resting in a hand-carved cradle beside the fire. It was on the 4th morning, when the skies finally cleared and the sun touched the frost-bitten trees, that Boone arrived. Samuel had gone out to check the traps near the southern ridge, his rifle slung over his shoulder, boots crunching through the fresh powder. That's when he saw the shape, large, motionless, curled against the base of an old cedar stump. At first, he thought it was a wolf, injured or dead. But as he drew closer, the creature lifted its head, revealing soft brown eyes beneath a thick coat of snow-matted white fur. It was a Great Pyrenees, unmistakable even in the snow. Massive, with broad shoulders and thick legs, his coat was rough at the edges but dense and warm. He looked like a creature carved from the very winter itself. There was no collar. No tag. Just a faint scar above one eye and a stillness in his posture that spoke of long wandering. Samuel approached slowly, hand extended. The dog didn't flinch. He simply stared up at him, calm and tired. Something passed between them, some unspoken understanding, and Samuel lowered his rifle. "You lost, boy," he muttered. The dog stood and followed him home. Back at the cabin, June hesitated at the doorway when she saw the size of him. "He's bigger than the sleds they use in town," she said, eyes narrowed. Samuel chuckled. "And gentler than most men I've met." But it was Elsie who made the final decision. The moment Boone stepped inside, he walked straight past the fire, past the kitchen, and to the small cradle by the wall. He stood there, tall and unmoving, just watching. Elsie stirred, eyes fluttering open. One tiny hand reached up toward the great beast, her fingers curling in the air. Boone lowered his head and placed his nose gently against her palm. Elsie giggled. That night, he slept beside her cradle, and every night after. He became part of the Carter family without ever needing an invitation. When June cooked, Boone lay quietly under the table. When Samuel chopped wood, Boone stood at the tree line, facing the forest like a silent sentinel. And when Elsie cried, only Boone could calm her, sometimes with just the brush of his head against her blanket. Years passed. Boone never left. He grew heavier, broader. His coat turned thicker in winter, golden at the edges in summer. Yet his eyes never changed, always watching, always waiting. He followed Elsie as she learned to crawl, then walk, then run in the snow. He pulled her on a sled in the spring thaw, walked beside her as she explored the woods near the edge of the property. And all the while, deep in the forest, the wolves watched too. But they never came close. Not yet. Not with Boone standing guard. By the time Elsie was 5, the forest had become her playground. She couldn't go to school like most children in the lower states, not that the Carters would have sent her even if they could. The nearest school was over 50 miles away, and strangers asked too many questions about Elsie's hair, her pale skin, and the strange shimmer that sometimes danced across her eyes when she was near the trees. So, her education came from nature and the home, taught by June in the morning, by Samuel through chores and stories, and by Boone, always, through silent companionship. It was Boone who noticed first. One morning, in the middle of February, Boone refused to let Elsie outside. She stood by the front door in her little fur-lined boots, her gloved hand resting on the knob, but Boone blocked her path with his massive body, his deep eyes fixed on something only he could sense. "Boone, move," Elsie said, pouting. But he didn't. When Samuel opened the door himself, he understood why. Just beyond the front porch, barely visible in the new snow, were tracks, wide, deep prints, far too large for any ordinary wolf. The spacing was strange, too. They didn't follow a straight line but rather a broad, sweeping circle, almost ritualistic, surrounding the clearing near the woodpile. Samuel crouched beside them, his breath misting in the cold. He placed his hand beside one of the prints. It was nearly the size of his open palm. He said nothing to June that day. But Boone didn't need words. He didn't leave Elsie's side for the rest of the afternoon. That night, while the family sat around the fire, Elsie looked up from her picture book. "They're coming back," she said softly, without looking up. June glanced at her. "Who, sweetheart?" "The quiet ones," Elsie replied. "They talk to the snow." Boone lifted his head from his paws and stared at her for a long moment before rising and walking to the front door. He stood there, still as stone, ears forward. The following morning, Samuel found claw marks on the back corner of the barn, 3 long, clean slashes across the wood, nearly 6 feet from the ground. Whatever left them had been standing tall. Too tall. The traps he'd laid weeks ago for smaller predators, lynx, foxes, were untouched. But the meat in one of them had been taken, cleanly, without tripping the mechanism. As dusk settled, Boone began pacing the perimeter of the cabin, his massive form moving like a ghost through the snow. His breath steamed in the air. His eyes never left the dark line of the tree line. Elsie stood at the window, her hand resting on the frosted glass. "They're not wolves," she said quietly. "Not really." June knelt beside her, pulling her close. "How do you know that, baby?" Elsie didn't answer. She simply leaned into her mother's arms, watching Boone in the snow. And deep in the forest, far beyond what the eye could see, something watched back. The air changed before the wolves were seen. It wasn't the cold. Alaska was always cold in February, but something deeper, more primal. A hush fell over the woods. Birds disappeared. Squirrels vanished. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Boone began sleeping less. He took to standing guard at night, his white coat nearly blending into the snowdrifts, save for his dark eyes that glinted like coals in the lantern light. He paced, silent and steady, just outside Elsie's bedroom window. One evening, Samuel and Boone returned late from checking the traps near the lower ridge. Samuel looked shaken. Boone was limping, a deep gash along his side bleeding through his thick fur. "I saw one," Samuel said, voice tight. "It wasn't like any wolf I've seen before." He sat down heavily, the snow still clinging to his boots. Boone lay at his feet, panting hard, eyes flicking toward the door. "Big," Samuel continued. "Larger than Boone. Silver fur, almost black at the tips. Eyes like gold. It didn't run. Just stood there, watching." June knelt beside Boone, cleaning the wound with warm water and herbs. Elsie stood silently by the hearth, her fingers twisting the hem of her dress. "They're getting closer," she said. "The one with the gold eyes, he's the leader." Samuel turned toward her, brow furrowed. "Elsie, how do you?" But she didn't answer. That night, Boone wouldn't sleep indoors. Despite the gash, he stood in the snow again, staring into the forest. The Carters took turns watching through the window, rifle by the door. And then, just after midnight, the howling began. Not one wolf, but many. A chorus of voices, layered and haunting, echoing across the frozen valley. It wasn't the wild call of a natural pack. It was something more coordinated, more ritualistic, rising and falling like a song sung to the moon. Boone didn't howl back. He stood, chest heaving, head low. In the morning, they found strange markings in the snow, almost like symbols, carved into the drifts by massive paws. They found no blood, no fur, just patterns encircling the house in wide arcs. Like warnings. Or invitations. June brought out an old book that had belonged to her grandmother, worn, leather-bound, filled with stories from the native and settler folklore of northern Alaska. She flipped through the brittle pages until she found one marked in faded pencil. The hollow-eyed ones. According to legend, these were no ordinary wolves. They were creatures born of betrayal, once protectors of children marked by nature, turned against their purpose after a sacred bond was broken. Now they hunted those children, seeking to reclaim what had been lost, or destroy it. Elsie was that child. And Boone, June realized, was not just her companion by chance. He had been drawn to Elsie by instinct, perhaps fate. The pack had waited long enough. They were done watching. They were coming. Snow fell in a slow, steady curtain the morning June decided to tell the truth. Elsie sat quietly by the window, her white hair falling like silk over her shoulders, eyes distant as though listening to a voice no one else could hear. Boone lay curled at her feet, his breathing shallow but steady, his wounded side wrapped in fresh linen. Samuel stoked the fire with a heavy hand, his face drawn, as though he already suspected what June was about to say. She sat at the kitchen table, the old book open before her, the one with cracked leather and hand-scribbled margins passed down through her mother's line. She ran her fingers over a faded drawing, an infant swaddled in fur, resting beneath a crescent moon. Wolves sat at her side like sentinels. "My grandmother called it the ice-born line," June said softly. "A bloodline that skipped generations. Always female. always marked by winter. Samuel looked up, wary. You believe all that now? I didn't. Not until Elsie. She turned the page, revealing more illustrations, symbols etched into snowbanks, children with luminous eyes, wolves bowed low at their feet. Elsie's not just different, June said. She's the last of them. Samuel shook his head. What does that mean? It means the stories were real. Our family was once bonded with the wild, keepers of peace between the natural world and mankind. But something happened. The pact was broken. One of the Iceborn betrayed the wolves, used their protection for power, not balance. The wolves were cursed for their loyalty. And ever since, they've hunted the children born with that blood. June's voice trembled. Elsie is the first in nearly a century. Elsie turned her head, her voice barely a whisper. They don't want to kill me, Mama. They want to test me. Boone raised his head. June stared at her daughter. How do you know that? I hear them when I sleep, Elsie said. Not words, not exactly. But feelings. They're confused. Angry. But afraid, too. Of me. Silence followed. Boone rose slowly, walked to Elsie, and pressed his nose to her hand. She smiled faintly. I think Boone came because of the old bond, Elsie said. Something inside him knew I needed him. And he needs me, too. Samuel rubbed his hand across his face. So, what do we do? Pray they change their minds? June shook her head. We prepare. There's only one way to break the curse, the wolves must be given a choice. If Elsie can face the Alpha and speak the old tongue, she might restore the bond. Or, her voice faltered. Or we lose her. Samuel rose, his voice hard. That's not going to happen. He turned to Boone. You hear me, boy? You keep her safe. No matter what. Boone stared back, and for a moment, there was something ancient in his gaze, something beyond dog, beyond man. He understood. Outside, the snow deepened, and from far beyond the frozen ridge, the wolves howled once more. The days grew shorter. The nights colder. In the final week before the blood moon, the Carter homestead became a fortress, not of stone, but of resolve. Samuel worked from dawn to dusk, reinforcing the cabin walls with timber, hanging lines of metal bells along the tree-line, and placing traps in the snow with silent precision. He moved with a quiet fury, every hammer swing a prayer, every knot tied with the desperation of a father who knew he couldn't stop what was coming, but meant to slow it down long enough. Inside, June boiled herbs, weaving protective charms from juniper branches, carved bones, and braided pine straw. She placed them above doorways, under floorboards, tucked behind bookshelves. At night, she whispered old lullabies to herself, songs her grandmother once sang in a language that only the wild remembered. Boone, though still healing, grew stronger each day. He patrolled the cabin without command, moving with purpose, despite the thick scar down his flank. He slept in short bursts, always near Elsie, always listening. Sometimes, in the quiet hours, he would sit by the window and growl low into the dark, not in fear, but in warning. Elsie changed too. She no longer ran through the snow or giggled at Boone's tale. She had grown quiet, still, like the trees after a storm. Her eyes, those piercing, ice-blue eyes, seemed to look through walls, into places no child should understand. When she walked, Boone followed. When she paused, he stood still, nose lifted, sensing something only she could see. One morning, Elsie stood barefoot in the snow just outside the cabin, her nightgown fluttering in the wind. Boone was beside her. June rushed out, panic rising in her throat. Elsie, she cried. The girl turned slowly. They're close. I can feel them thinking. Samuel stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand. "We need more time." "There is no more time," Elsie said simply. That night, the moon rose red as blood, enormous and low on the horizon. The sky turned to rust. The snow reflected its hue, painting the world in shades of danger. Boone stood at the door, head lowered, tail still. Samuel loaded the last of his shells and kissed June on the forehead. They said nothing. Elsie stood in the center of the room, her hands folded before her, eyes closed. Her lips moved silently, repeating words from dreams, from memories, from someplace deep in her blood. She was ready. Down the valley, the howls began, closer than ever. Dozens of them. The sound echoed through the trees like drums before battle. Then silence. Not a crack of a twig. Not a breath of wind. The forest itself seemed to kneel before what was coming. And then they appeared. Dozens of shadows moving as one. Massive, silent, eyes glowing like embers in the dark. Surrounding the cabin. Watching. Waiting. Boone stood in the doorway, his breath fogging in the red light, body rigid. Elsie placed her hand gently on his head. "They've come," she said. Boone did not bark. He simply stepped forward, into the night. The air was thick, silent, pulsing with tension. Under the crimson glow of the blood moon, the Carter cabin stood like a lone lantern in the void, its windows glowing soft amber, its walls trembling with the promise of violence. Outside, the snow reflected the moonlight in eerie shades of rust and shadow. And just beyond the tree line, eyes shimmered. Dozens of them. Samuel stood at the front door, rifle in hand, jaw tight, boots braced against the wooden floor. His eyes scanned the dark, waiting for movement, listening for the crack of snow beneath paw or claw. Boone stood beside him, tail stiff, body low, ears forward. The scar down his side tugged as his muscles tightened. His breath came slow and even, clouds of mist rising from his nose. June knelt beside Elsie in the center of the cabin, wrapping her daughter in a thick fur cloak stitched with juniper thread and braided charms. Elsie's face was pale, her lips moving silently, whispering the words she had dreamed of for weeks. The old language. The language of the iceborn. Then it happened. A crash at the back window. Glass shattered. A blur of gray fur surged inside. Samuel turned and fired, once, twice. The first round missed. The second struck the beast in the shoulder, sending it sprawling across the floor. But already another wolf was at the door, slamming its massive frame against the timber with bone-shaking force. Boone leapt before Samuel could react, slamming into the wolf mid-charge. The two tumbled into the snow in a flurry of growls and blood. Boone bit hard, his powerful jaws clamping down on the wolf's neck as they rolled. A second wolf lunged from the shadows, aiming for Boone's flank. Samuel fired again, the shot splitting the night. The wolf dropped, yelping, and vanished into the trees. More followed. They moved with terrifying coordination, testing the walls, flanking the doors, leaping onto the roof. Samuel fired until his last shell clicked empty, then swung the butt of the rifle like a club. He fought not like a soldier, but like a father. Inside, Elsie stood up, her voice louder now, the old tongue flowing through the room like a chant. The temperature dropped. The flames in the hearth flickered blue. Boone, bloodied but unyielding, burst back into the cabin through the broken door just as the largest wolf, black as coal with gold eyes, stepped into view. The alpha. It didn't snarl. It didn't attack. It stared at Elsie. Boone stood between them, chest heaving, fur matted red. He growled, not from fear, but from a place deeper. A place of instinct. Of loyalty. Elsie placed her hand on Boone's back. The alpha growled softly, low and vibrating, its eyes flicking from Boone to the girl. it took a step forward. Boone bared his teeth. And Elsie, steady and unshaken, began to speak. Not in fear. Not in pleading. But in command. The blood moon shimmered above them, and the air itself held its breath. What happened next would decide whether the curse would break, or whether the Carter family would vanish into legend. The alpha wolf stood at the threshold, massive and still, its golden eyes locked on Elsie. The cabin had fallen silent. The smaller wolves had retreated into the shadows, watching. Waiting. Even the wounded ones outside had crawled back into the trees, as if the outcome of this moment would dictate their next breath. The cold had thickened. Time itself seemed frozen beneath the weight of what hovered in the air. Boone did not move from his place between Elsie and the wolf. His body was trembling, not from fear, but from exhaustion. Blood matted his snow-white coat, but his eyes burned with undimmed fire. One wrong twitch, one misread gesture, and he would give his life without hesitation. But the alpha did not strike. Elsie stepped forward, slowly, her small hand still resting gently on Boone's fur. Her lips moved with a rhythm that didn't belong to this age. The language was ancient, primal, and strange, but the wolves understood it. "I am iceborn," she said softly in the old tongue. "But I come in peace." The alpha's ears twitched. "You were betrayed," she continued, her voice steady despite the tremor in her fingers. "Not by me. Not by my blood. But by fear. Fear broke the bond." The alpha growled, low and slow. Not a warning, but a response. A memory. A wound still raw. "I do not fear you," she said. "I see you." And then she knelt. There, in the center of the room, surrounded by broken wood, burned herbs, and the weight of generations, Elsie knelt before the wolf. Boone let out a single, low whine, but did not move to stop her. The alpha stepped forward. Closer. Closer still. It stood over her now. Boone tensed, but stayed. The wolf lowered its massive head and sniffed the top of Elsie's pale hair. For a long moment, it stayed like that, nose twitching, breath warm against her skin. Then it pulled back. With a sound almost like a sigh, the alpha turned, and walked toward the broken doorway. As it passed Boone, it gave one soft exhale, a quiet acknowledgement. The others followed. One by one, the wolves melted into the forest, their paws silent on the snow, their bodies dissolving into shadow. No growls. No attack. Only the hush of resolution. The cabin was still. Elsie slumped to the floor, her strength spent. Boone collapsed beside her, his body finally giving in, head resting in her lap. June rushed forward, wrapping them both in furs, pressing her face to Elsie's crown. Samuel stood at the door, rifle hanging limp in his hands, mouth slightly open in disbelief. Outside, the blood moon began to fade, the red bleeding away into silver. The curse had not been broken by force, nor by fire. It had been broken by choice. By a child who listened. By a dog who stood unshaken. And by a moment of trust, when both sides stepped away from fear, and remembered who they once were. The sun rose pale and slow over the Alaskan range, brushing the snowy peaks with gold. The blood moon was gone, swallowed by the sky, and with it, the last trace of the terrible night. The wolves had vanished, leaving only wide, quiet tracks in the snow and a silence so deep it pressed gently against the windows like a benediction. Inside the Carter cabin, the aftermath settled like snowfall. Boone lay near the fire, wrapped in thick quilts. His breathing was shallow but steady, his wounds cleaned and dressed. He had not moved much since the wolves had left, though every so often, his ears flicked or his tail thumped faintly when Elsie's hand found his head. He had fought like a warrior, and now he rested like one, silent, dignified, and whole. Elsie stayed at his side. She hadn't spoken much since the pact was restored. She didn't need to. Something had changed in her, not broken, but deepened. Her presence was calmer now, rooted. Like someone who had walked through fire and come back with the embers still glowing inside her. Samuel, never one for ceremony, sat quietly at the edge of the hearth, carving small totems from spruce wood. He shaped a wolf, a girl, and a dog. When he finished, he set them on the mantel and nodded once, as if to seal the story in something permanent. June moved slowly through the house, checking the windows, tending to the herbs, cleaning what was left of the chaos. But every time she passed Boone, she paused to lay a hand on his thick white fur. Word traveled through the valley in its own quiet way. A hunter from a nearby cabin had seen the wolves leave, saw them pause at the edge of the frozen lake, then slip silently into the trees. Others claimed the howling had stopped all at once, like a spell being broken. By the end of the week, stories began to trickle through the village, of the child with the strange hair, the old blood, and the dog who faced the impossible and did not back down. People stopped avoiding the carters. They came with offerings, dried fish, warm bread, old family quilts. Not out of pity, but respect. They spoke less now about curses and more about guardianship, about legends that maybe weren't just stories after all. One evening, a group of children from the village asked to see Boone. They approached with caution, their mittened hands behind their backs. Elsie invited them inside, sat beside her old friend, and told them the tale. She left out the violence, the terror. She told them only of the wolves, the bond, and the choice that brought peace. And Boone, eyes half closed, let them pet his great head. He thumped his tail twice. Elsie smiled. "He's not just a dog," she said softly. "He's the reason I'm still here." Outside, the snow began to fall again, quiet, steady, gentle. And for the first time in weeks, Boone slept soundly. Because the child was safe. And the wild had bowed its head. Years passed like melting ice beneath a spring sun. The Carters remained in their cabin deep in the Alaskan wilderness, where the mountains still cast long shadows over the valley, and the spruce trees whispered with every wind. The world outside their home turned faster, grew louder, but inside those woods, time held its breath. Elsie grew tall and graceful, her once childlike features now sharpened by adolescence, though her eyes still held that ancient clarity, ice blue, ever watchful, ever listening. Her white hair, now braided and tied with strips of leather and carved bone beads, shimmered in the sun like snow dust. People still talked about her, some with reverence, others with curiosity. She had become a symbol of something old, something quiet, and sacred. And always, wherever she walked, Boone followed. Older now. Slower. The once proud Great Pyrenees bore his years like medals. His white coat had dulled around the muzzle, and his joints stiffened in winter. The scar on his side, long since healed, was now hidden beneath thick fur, but Elsie often rested her hand there, as if to remind him, and herself, of what they had come through together. He no longer chased shadows or patrolled the perimeter. He no longer needed to. The woods were quiet. The wolves had not returned. But still, Boone watched. Every morning, Elsie and Boone climbed the ridge that overlooked the valley, a long, slow walk now, taken at Boone's pace. There, they would sit in the snow and listen. The trees cracked gently in the cold. The sky opened wide. Sometimes, in the far distance, a lone howl would echo, not a warning, not a threat, just a voice carried by the wind. Boone would lift his head, ears twitching. Elsie would smile softly. "They remember," she'd say. In the village below, she had become a quiet teacher. Not in a schoolhouse, but in the open woods. She taught children how to move silently, how to track deer by their scent, how to speak to animals not with words, but with stillness. They listened when she spoke, more than they did to their parents. There was something about her that couldn't be explained, only felt. And always, Boone was nearby. A silent companion. A living legend. One winter evening, as the snow fell gently outside, Elsie sat by the fire with a child in her lap, reading from a hand-bound book. The child pointed to the final illustration, a girl with white hair and a giant dog by her side, standing before a ring of wolves under a red moon. "Is that really you?" the child asked. Elsie nodded. "That's Boone too." Was he scared? Elsie looked down at Boone, now sleeping soundly by the fire, his breathing soft and steady. "No," she whispered. "He wasn't scared. He was born to protect." The child leaned against her, and the flames crackled low. Outside, the snow deepened. And near the edge of the trees, a set of golden eyes blinked once, then disappeared. But Boone did not stir. He had already seen everything. He was the watcher in the snow. And his watch was never truly over.